Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In a quiet suburb just outside Milwaukee, life moved at a rhythmic pace. Children played on the neatly manicured lawns, their laughter punctuating the stillness of early evening. Hidden among the rows of charming bungalows was 34-year-old Alison Hartley, single mother striving to provide a better life for her 10-year-old daughter, Lily. To her neighbors, she was an embodiment of resilience. No one could guess that one unremarkable Tuesday evening would unravel the comforting facade of their community. Alison spent her days at the local school as a beloved third-grade teacher. Her colleagues often marveled at her unwavering patience and ability to connect with each child. She had recently taken up jogging, a newfound passion that allowed her to escape the hectic demands of teaching while clearing her mind. Each evening, as the sun set behind the tree-laden horizon, she laced up her well-worn sneakers, ready to embrace the world beyond her front door. When night fell on September 12, 2023, she set out on her regular route, believing it to be just another ordinary evening of exercise. The familiar sensation of the cool air against her skin was comforting, a reminder of her life's routine. However, unbeknownst to her, this night harbored a dark omen. As darkness enveloped the streets, Alison was oblivious to the shadow that trailed her. The peaceful suburb, once a sanctuary filled with the sounds of children and laughter, would soon be transformed into the backdrop of a harrowing mystery that would haunt both the residents and law enforcement for months to come. The victim. The call came just after midnight. Detective Mark Thompson had spent the evening working a separate case, his mind buzzing with details when he received the news. An officer on the scene reported a woman found unconscious along the jogging path that wound through Elmwood Park. He quickly gathered his things and headed toward the soft glow of police lights, the heavy weight of apprehension settling in his stomach. As he arrived, the atmosphere was thick with unease. Flashing lights illuminated the darkened area, revealing the outline of a body sprawled at the edge of the path, surrounded by the hushed murmurs of the gathered officers. Alison Hartley lay motionless, her auburn hair splayed across the gravel like autumn leaves at the start of winter. In the triage bag nearby, it was clear that paramedics had fought valiantly to restore life, but their efforts were in vain. Mark's heart sank as he approached the scene, taking in the details of the victim's familiar visage. A photo of Alison smiling at a classroom event hung on the walls of the staff room. He'd seen her interact with students, her eyes filled with warmth and encouragement. Now, the vibrant teacher was reduced to a haunting reminder of horror in what was supposed to be a serene suburban neighborhood. The shock of violence lingered in the air like a bitter fog. As the forensic team began their work, meticulously collecting evidence, Mark's mind raced with questions. What had happened here, and why had such a gentle soul crossed paths with violence? He glanced around at the park's surroundings, knowing the answer wouldn't just emerge. He was well aware of the complex web of stories that lay hidden beneath the surface. The motive could range anywhere from personal grievances to a chance encounter, but Mark had learned from experience that clues often hid where least expected. The reality of crime was stark. Beneath the calm of daily life lay the potential for tragedy. And tonight, tragedy had struck a mother, a teacher, and so much more. The crime scene. The glow of flashlights swept across the gravel path, revealing every jagged rock and fallen twig as the forensic team cautiously combed the area. Detective Mark Thompson stood just beyond the cordoned-off perimeter, absorbing the scene with a critical eye. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and lost innocence. It felt like the park itself mourned for the life extinguished too soon. The lone jogging path, usually a sanctuary for fitness enthusiasts and families, was now marked by the tragedy that had unfolded. Beneath the towering trees, their branches a tapestry of shadows, the remnants of Alison Hartley's final moments lay scattered like breadcrumbs. Stray leaves crunched softly underfoot as officers snapped photos, documenting every detail, each marking on the ground, every sign of struggle, and the indelible presence of violence that had invaded this peaceful space. As Mark examined the shallow indentation on the ground nearby, the faintest glint caught his eye, a sparkling charm bracelet, its heart-shaped pendant engraved with the initials. Al. It matched the description of the jewelry Alison was known to wear, a gift from her late mother. It felt oddly intimate, a piece of her life now trapped in this haunting tableau. He signaled to an officer to bag it for evidence, acutely aware of the emotional weight it carried. With each addition to the evidence log, a sense of urgency crept into his thoughts. Who would do this to a beloved community member? The pounding of footsteps echoed as a crime scene investigator approached, kneeling down to uncover additional debris. A stray hair clung to a nearby bush. Would it lead to the killer? The thought shattered Mark's focus, the reality of the investigation looming larger than life. He listened as the forensic team began sketching the scene, creating a blueprint of the crime. They noted the absence of obvious defensive wounds, which led Mark to consider, had this been a premeditated attack, or an indiscriminate act of violence? As he turned his gaze towards the darkened path Alison had taken, the stories hidden in the shadows beckoned, taunting him with secrets that were now his responsibility to unearth. Time was slipping away. He could feel it. Someone had to answer for this injustice if only he could find the missing pieces of this tragic puzzle. The early investigation. The morning sun rose reluctantly the next day, casting a pallid light over the scene of the crime. Detective Mark Thompson and his partner, Detective Sarah Lopez, gathered at the station to piece together the fragments that defined Alison Hartley's last hour. The hum of fluorescent lights hung in the air, a stark contrast to the solemn urgency that gripped them. Their first stop was the victim's home. Pulling up to the small bungalow, Mark noted the meticulously kept garden, flowers blooming vibrantly despite the shadow of recent events. The door swung open to reveal Lily Hartley, her wide, innocent eyes peering from behind her mother's best friend, Karen. Mark's heart tight upon meeting the child. Do you explain the unthinkable to a 10-year-old? Lily, this is Detective Thompson, Karen said softly, ushering the girl over. He's here to ask some questions about your mom. With a few gentle nudges, Mark encouraged Lily to share what she remembered from the previous day. She spoke of her mother's routine, their trip to the local farmer's market for fresh fruits, and the evening dance practice for the upcoming school talent show. Yet as he probed, he could see the clouds of confusion and fear begin to gather in her young expression. Did your mom say anything unusual last night? Mark asked, carefully framing his inquiry. Lily paused, fingers fidgeting with a teddy bear clutched in her tiny arms. She said she was just going for a jog and that she would be back in time for dinner. But then she got angry at my tablet because I wouldn't put it down to help her cook. It was a glimpse of remorse, a child wishing for one last moment with her mother rather than the impending heartache of loss. It struck Mark deeply. a sharp reminder of the stakes in this investigation. As the day unfolded, the detectives interviewed neighbors, slowly reconstructing Allison's afternoon right before she vanished. Eyewitness accounts revealed a shadowing figure, a man described as stocky, with dark hair, who had been seen loitering near the entrance of the park. Mark scribbled down the details, hopeful they could track him down and read the motives behind that peculiar presence. Returning to the precinct, Mark and Sarah began poring over the evidence collected from the crime scene. Photographs and Lily's recollections. Each detail shimmered, a critical thread waiting to weave the whole story. Together they would hold the weight of not merely finding a killer, but providing justice and solace to an aching little girl now alone. The clock was ticking, and every minute weighed heavily on their responsibility to uncover the truth. The dead ends. Days turned into a grueling week, and as the investigations deepened, Mark Thompson found himself wading through a quagmire of leads that felt increasingly fruitless. The profile of the stocky man seen loitering at the park entrance had turned into a ghost, slipping through the fingers of law enforcement despite extensive canvassing by the precinct. Witness descriptions varied widely. One neighbor swore he had dark sunglasses, while another insisted his hair was bright red. Each inconsistent detail only clouded the investigation further. In stark contrast to the sun-drenched optimism characteristic of suburban life, the grim atmosphere within the precinct had taken a toll. Long hours had forged a mounting sense of urgency and frustration, with each passing day deepening the emotional chasm left by Allison's death. Posters bearing Lily's earnest face glared from bulletin boards, every glance serving as a reminder of the child awaiting answers. Mark leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose as exhaustion pressed on him like an unyielding weight. He unrolled a whiteboard cluttered with notes and timelines, feeling like a jigsaw puzzler missing key pieces. He noted the names of the rabble of individuals he had contacted, acquaintances of Allison, teachers from the school, and even distant relatives. Every inquiry had brought him back to the same overwhelming void, a depthless silence where the truth should reside. In desperation, Mark dialed for help, connecting with detectives who had tackled similar cases, searching for guidance or a semblance of direction. "It's like chasing shadows," he remarked with a heavy sigh. "I feel like we're walking in circles. The longer the case goes unsolved, the more it festers," one seasoned officer reminded him. Chewing on the end of his pen, "Keep digging. Sometimes the smallest detail can crack the whole thing wide open." With renewed resolve, Mark returned to the field, tirelessly retracing Allison's final steps. He returned to the park, studying every inch of the jogging trail like an archaeologist unearthing history. Around him, joggers weaved past, and mothers strolled with their children. The normalcy of it all was a stark and painful reminder of everything lost. Just as defeat threatened to encroach, he spotted a familiar bench that overlooked the path. A woman sat reading the paper, her brow furrowed in concentration. Drawn by instinct, Mark approached the possibility of a fresh lead, igniting the dimming embers of hope. Just as he cleared his throat to speak, a sudden shout interrupted a voice from behind, calling out to the woman with an urgency that felt unmistakable. Mark turned, and anxiety knotted in his stomach. Maybe the shadows had begun to crawl away after all. A break in the case. The unexpected commotion drew Mark's attention like a moth to the flame. He turned to see a man striding toward the bench with an air of urgency. Clad in a blue shirt and dark jeans, he bore a resemblance to the stocky figure described by witnesses. Yet there was something different about Hyman's unmarked demeanor that sent vibrations of tension through the air. The woman on the bench looked startled, her book slipping from her hands. "David?" she asked, confusion coloring her voice. "Get away from here. You needed to come with me," he insisted, looking over his shoulder, his face etched with anxiety. Mark's instincts prickled. This interaction from a mere stranger suddenly felt pivotal. As the man and woman exchanged hurried words, Mark approached. He tapped the man's shoulder, feeling a rush of adrenaline as the stranger spun around, eyes wide. "Detective Thompson, Milwaukee PD." "What's the hurry?" "Nothing to do with you," David snapped defensively. His body language shifted from tense to outright hostile. Just hold on," Mark interrupted, trying to maintain control over the situation. "Did you see Alison Hartley last week?" David's expression faltered, and for a fleeting second, Mark sensed the man was weighing the risk of revealing too much. "I saw her running," he stammered. "But that's all. I didn't." "Did you see someone else with her? Maybe near that park?" Before David could respond, his phone buzzed. His attention. With a hasty glance at the screen, he appeared torn between responding and maintaining his ground. That momentary lapse was all Mark needed. "Let's step aside," he suggested, motioning toward a quieter area nearby. The woman on the bench looked on with concern, confused by their exchange. As the two men moved away from prying eyes, Mark kept his voice calm yet firm. "You know something more, don't you? If you wanted to help, you need to speak up." David hesitated, and for the first time, Mark saw fear flash in his eyes. "Fine, but you have to promise me protection. I didn't have anything to do with it. He saw something I shouldn't have." Intrigued, Mark pressed in closer as David's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think I saw someone at the park." "Someone stalking her the day she disappeared." Mark's heart raced. Here was the inkling of a breakthrough he had long hoped for. "Tell me everything you know," he urged, leaning in, ready to grasp onto this thread with both hands. Tonight, perhaps, they would begin peeling back the layers, cloaking the truth. The suspect. The air felt electrified as Mark Thompson listened intently to David's hushed words. They stood just outside of the bustling park, the sounds of laughter and joy fading into a distant backdrop. David's face contorted with tension as he forged ahead, his initial bravado unraveling under the weight of the truth. "I didn't see her get hurt," David started, eyes darting nervously. "But I saw a guy hanging around. At first I thought he was just another runner. But there was this I don't know. Something off about him." He kept looking over his shoulder, like he was waiting for someone. Mark leaned in closer, resisting the urge to interrupt. "What did he look like?" "Stocky, like I told you," David replied. "Dark hair? Looked like he hadn't groomed in weeks. I thought maybe he was just a creep, you know. But it was like he was fixated on her." I started to get a bad feeling and didn't want to stick around to find out more. "Did you see where he went?" Mark pressed, intensity brewing in his voice. "Yeah, he left just after Alison started jogging. I remember thinking he must have turned off somewhere. But it was strange he headed towards that alley by the old convenience store. No one ever goes back there after dark." Mark's thoughts raced through a timeline of Alison's final moments. Could this man be the link they were searching for? "Did you catch his name? Or anything else that might help?" David hesitated, his face twisting with uncertainty. "I overheard a conversation between him and some other guys about Alison. But something about local trouble." They called him Bull. But that's it. I swear, I didn't think anything of it until I found out she was killed. Stay where you are, Mark instructed firmly, quickly pulling out his phone to relay details back to the precinct. I need backup at that alley. You might just have given us our suspect. As he relayed the information, a flurry of activity erupted around him. The community buzzed with concern, but remained unaware of the pinpointed tension lurking just beneath the surface. Following the adrenaline rush of a new lead, Mark felt the familiar weight of responsibility pressing hard against his chest. Protecting the citizens of Milwaukee had always been his commitment. Yet each step towards justice for Alison and Lily was like treading through quicksand, each moment fraught with uncertainty. When backup arrived, they fanned out toward the alley that David had indicated. The atmosphere crackled with purpose. This could be the break they desperately needed. Mark moved through the shadows, every instinct on high alert, unwilling to let this moment slip away, intensifying the urgency that had echoed through these streets far too long. As they reached the mouth of the alley, Mark felt a profound tension mount. Would they find Bull waiting in the shadows? Or would they confront yet another dead end? The pursuit of justice was never straightforward, and tonight, Mark vowed to see justice served for the victim who had slipped through the cracks. The trial. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence, the kind that pressed upon the collective shoulders of those gathered, a palpable reminder of the tragedy that had brought them here. Mark Thompson sat in the back, flanked by several members of the police force who had dedicated weeks to the case. They had worked tirelessly to ensure justice for Alison Hartley and for her daughter, Lily. At the front of the room, the accused, known only as Bull, shifted anxiously in his seat. He was a stocky man in his late 30s, sporting unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. His deep-set eyes darted around the courtroom, taking in the crowd, and for a moment, his bravado slipped, revealing a flicker of discomfort beneath his hardened exterior. This was a moment of consequence that he could not escape. The proceedings began with the prosecution's opening statements. The lead prosecutor stood tall, her voice steady, as she painted a vivid picture of Alison's life here: devoted mother, a beloved teacher, a woman whose future had been brutally stolen. Detailed accounts of that fateful night echoed within the walls. Witness testimonies, including David's, recounted the ominous interactions leading up to Alison's disappearance, each word igniting a collective outrage in the gallery. Mark observed Lily seated beside her Aunt Karen, her little fingers intertwined and her expression a mixture of confusion and steely resolve. She had shown bravery beyond her years, attending each day to ensure her mother's voice was heard, and he never lost sight of the impact this case would have not just on her, but on the community scarred by the loss. As the prosecution presented evidence, video footage from nearby surveillance cameras, coupled with forensic analysis of DNA found under Alison's fingernails, built an undeniable case against Bull. He was painted as a predator who had stalked and assaulted Alison before her life was extinguished in the park that night. The defense, however, attempted to shift the narrative, arguing that circumstantial evidence meant nothing without definitive proof challenging the prosecution's portrayal. Mark felt his stomach twist as they cast doubt where none should exist. With each expert witness, each emotional plea from Alison's friends and family, Mark could see the emotional toll reverberating within the room. The specter of grief hung heavy, yet empowered by the fervent desire for justice. Days turned into weeks as testimony unfolded, haunting recollections mingling with heartfelt testimonials about Alison's life. The jury sat engrossed, leaning in with every word uttered. Finally, after a lengthy deliberation, the moment arrived. The jurors filed back into the courtroom, their faces drawn, while a collective breath held in anticipation filled the air. The judge's gavel echoed as silence enveloped the room, a still hush broken only by the judge's words. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder." A wave of emotion cascaded through the gallery, relief mingling with sadness. Mark glanced at Lily, whose eyes glistened. Even at her tender age, she seemed to understand the significance of this moment. Bull's expression remained inscrutable, yet a flicker of fear crossed his face at the verdict this future now sealed. Mark could only hope that this was but a starting point for healing in Lily's life, a long way to truly finding closure. As he exited the courtroom, the weight of the trial settled on him. Each victory felt bittersweet, a reminder that justice did not undo the pain of loss. Yet it made clear that beneath every tragedy lay a story worth telling, a narrative that soon would lead them all towards a fragile promise of renewal and hope. The aftermath. The weeks following the trial were an uneasy mixture of relief and unrest. For Mark Thompson, the victory felt hollow, a mere salve for the deep wounds left by the loss of Alison Hartley. The somber echoes of the courtroom hung heavy in his mind, the weight of justice executed accompanied by the unsettling reality that a mother was gone, leaving behind a 10-year-old girl grasping at what was left of her childhood. As Mark walked through the precinct one crisp autumn morning, he caught sight of Lily and her Aunt Karen at the front desk. They were picking up Alison's personal belongings, artifacts of a life abruptly cut short. The sight twisted like a knife in his gut. He had watched the child endure heartbreaking tribulations, showing strength in ways that belied her age. Still, the knowledge that she now faced a world without her beloved mother was a burden he couldn't shake. "Hey, Lily," he greeted gently, kneeling to her level. "How are you holding up?" She looked up at him, her eyes solemn yet resilient. "I'm okay," she replied, though it was clear the weight of recent events lingered. "Aunt Karen says we're going to move. It's too hard to stay here." Mark felt a pang of sorrow at the thought of Lily leaving the memories etched in their neighborhood, the laughter at the park. "You know, your mom was really proud of you. She always talked about how brave you are." A flicker of a smile crept across her small face, but it quickly faded. "I just wish I could have one last hug," she whispered, her voice barely escaping her lip. Mark's heart ached at her vulnerability, and he nodded, wishing he could somehow give her that moment back. In the weeks that ensued, the media cycle gradually shifted focus. Though the case remained an undercurrent in the community, many rallied around the Hartley family, creating support groups and outreach initiatives in Alison's name, striving to honor her legacy. The local schools held remembrance events, transforming the pain of loss into teaching moments about love, respect, and resilience in the face of violence. Mark found himself enveloped in the whirlwind of outreach efforts as well, speaking at events and engaging with community members about the importance of vigilance and support in their neighborhoods. Each dialogue reaffirmed his commitment as a detective, but it also served as a reminder of those still coping with grief, their hearts forever altered by tragedy. As the autumn leaves began to change, the city felt as though it was collectively grieving. Yet amid that sorrow, threads of hope began to emerge. Lily had started attending counseling sessions, supported by Karen, and she began finding ways to cherish her mother's memory while embracing her own journey forward. Mark took solace in the knowledge that justice had been served, but remained aware there was no roadmap for healing. Still, the echoes of Alison's life remained a reminder of countless stories yet unwritten, of loved ones left behind to carry the burdens of loss intertwined with love. In that awareness, Mark understood that the pursuit of justice wasn't merely about nailing down the right suspect. It was about safeguarding the world for children like Lily, ensuring that love, resilience, and community triumphed even in their darkest days. And so, as he continued his work, he carried Alison's story with an unyielding commitment to ensure that her legacy would endure. Reflection. Standing on the edge of Elmwood Park, Mark Thompson gazed over the jogging path where Alison Hartley had once frequented, now shaded by a veil of autumn leaves. The low sun cast golden hues across the ground, transforming a once tranquil space into a bittersweet reminder of serenity shattered. It was strange how familiar places morphed in the wake of tragedy, imbued with a haunting resonance that lingered far beyond the crime itself. Mark reflected on the road that had led them here, a journey that began with chaos and confusion, but ultimately revealed the strength of community in its response to sorrow. He thought of Lily, who would forever carry the love of her mother while navigating the world alone. In the face of darkness, he had witnessed the resilience of a little girl, grounded in the memories of laughter and war. The space where Alison had jogged now embodied not just loss, but also the promise to keep her memory alive. Amid the harsh realities of his work, he found solace in knowing that justice had prevailed. Bull would face the repercussions of his heinous actions, but that closure did little to erase the pain. The community rallied around Lily, ensuring that despite her loss, she was entwined in the embrace of those who stood with her. As Mark turned to leave, he felt the weight on his heart ease ever so slightly. Reflection had a way of merging sorrow with strength, reminding him that while the journey had been fraught with despair, it had also illuminated the power of love, justice, and the unrelenting hope for a better tomorrow.